Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge cycling podcast with Benji Naesen. This is our Giro recap podcast. We love doing the previews and the recap podcast. We had to wait until this Sunday. We've both been a bit busy for us to both have some time in the diary. Apparently, Benji, I had kangaroos looking at me with Joey in their pouch the other day in Canberra. Benji, living in West Flanders, had a tractor run into his car. So just West Flanders things, I guess. How are you going today, Benji? Are you sleep deprived at the moment? I know you got to balance work and the podcast life more than I do. How have you been going? We got to find a way to slip in this Giro recap because it was a memorable edition.
Yeah, I'm not overly sleep deprived, but I've noticed that over the last couple of months, and it's not necessarily related to the podcast, mainly due to the fact that we're in a lockdown now in Belgium. COVID stuff makes me need to work remotely from home. And doing that, I've lost the discipline of waking up earlier to start working, to have an evening for myself and actually be able to do something. And I've pretty much gained the ability of staying up quite a long time at night. But obviously, every time I regret it when I need to wake up early. So yeah, it's a bit of a two-edged sword, I'd say, but not overly sleep deprived. I'm surviving. I know you've got a bit more trouble with that, knowing that the summer hour is now gone in Europe, and that has caused you to be able to get on these podcasts even an hour later, which is like 3-4 a.m. for you, or what?
2 hours later, because it became daylight saving as well in Australia at the same time. So Vuelta has been brutal. That's why I keep calling it the Giro in the daily recap podcast. But this Giro wrap-up podcast, like our Vuelta podcast, like all our pods, is brought to you by our partner, L'Ecole. They partner with us throughout the Giro. A lot of you have enjoyed using that Giro discount code that was available at the time throughout the Giro d'Italia and learning about L'Ecole. We enjoyed them bringing us the interview with Pello Bilbao. And if you want to check them out, they produce road cycling performance apparel only, just road cycling. That's what they focus on. And we saw that with Bilbao having a beautiful Giro d'Italia, obviously wearing the L'Ecole kit at Bahrain McLaren. If you want to check out their kit, it's at www.lecole.cc, Lecol.cc. The link is in the description of this YouTube video if you're listening on YouTube, and in the podcast show notes. But just like with the Tour de France wrap-up show, I think it'd be useful. I mean, it might be useful for you all to bring up on Pro Cycling Stats, which we often use, to bring up the Giro stage winners and what happened throughout the race. Because in a 3-week race, it is easy to forget what happened at the start. So like the Tour de France, I'm going to recap each of the stage winners and maybe give a quick précis over what happened in that stage. So stage 1 was the ITT, the windy one from Monreale to Palermo, obviously won by Filippo Ganna, his first of 4 stage wins. He won that. Became leader wearing the Maglia Rosa after stage 1, beat Dennis, beat Campanarts and Dowsett and co. And I think Rohan Dennis was really affected by the wind. And we saw on this stage that Geraint Thomas was looking in magic form, and that this wind and the time selection should have really affected GC, but in the end it didn't, because all the riders that went at a good time didn't really end up being contesting GC at all, because they were pulled out of the race for whatever reason. I should preface this by saying the favourites going into the Giro were Thomas, clear number 1 favourite. Second favourite was Simon Yates or Mitchelton Scott. And then, I don't even know who the other favourites, Kelderman and Nibali, Fulsang, I think were 3rd, 4th, 5th favourites. Maybe I'm probably forgetting someone else that has also pulled out. So Ganna, Maglia Rosa, Kreuzvik as well. Sorry to Kreuzvik. Kreuzvik was 3rd favourite. Stage 2 is to Agrigento, a stage finale they've used before. I think Rico won there in 2008. And a similar profile rider, maybe a bit punchier, won that, Diego Ulissi. He wins the Giro stage almost every year, the Italian, on UAE. Second and third were Peter Sagan and Mikel Honore. So Sagan looking very good. I was surprised he was up there, and that was a portent of things to come. Stage 2, Sagan later stalled out is looking quite good. Ganna kept the Maglia Rosa. Stage 3, Etna already. So we've got no real pure sprint stage yet. ITT, punchy finish on Agrigento, now a mountain finish up Etna. This was a magic stage in hindsight. Even better because the GC action was on fire. They were all attacking each other, etc. Nibali, Kelderman slipped up the road, and I think what you got to remember on this stage is Kelderman gained, I think, 26 places on GC, and he finished the stage 12 seconds ahead of the Fulsang, Nibali, Castroviejo, Pozzovivo group, and a good 23 or 24 seconds ahead of Almeida. So Kelderman dropped them all on this finale, and Jai Hindley was back in the Louis Meintjes group, 19th, with a minute 37 back, behind Bilbao, Almeida, etc. And I can't remember whether he was pacing for Kelderman. But Almeida moved into the Maglia Rosa. Jonathan Caicedo, the Ecuadorian, I'm pretty sure it might have been rainy, or maybe that was that was Narvaez. Ecuadorians did well at this year. He won the stage from a breakaway. Caicedo for Education First, the Ducks getting their first stage win in those jerseys when I think he dropped Visconti. Stage 4 to Villafranca Terrena, the first of 4 stage wins from Arnaud Demare. Just dominant in this year's Giro. We're going to talk about that in a second after I've gone through all of these. I'm pretty sure he beat Sagan, or Sagan came second pretty much every time to him. And he certainly did it on this stage. And also a good stage profile, a nice Cat 2 climb in the middle. I don't remember this being a boring stage at all, actually. 140 Ks with a climb in it. Stage 5 from Camigliatello Silano, Filippo Ganna won from a breakaway, dropping Thomas de Gendt, and maybe it was that Movistar rider Benji Rubio, when de Gendt refused to work with him to chase down Ganna. Ganna, his second stage win on a mountain stage in the break. Joao Almeida, his second day already in the Maglia Rosa, and he kept that for just the best part of 2 weeks. And this was another really interesting stage, I think. And the GC group pretty much came in all together. But yeah, Almeida kept picking up those bonus seconds as well. So Ganna, an incredible stage win, 34 seconds ahead of the GC group. Stage 6, Arnaud Demar's second win. Also like quite a hilly stage, I think, not a pure sprint stage. That was ahead of Michael Matthews and Fabio Fellini. So that was a really impressive win from Demare. Sagan wasn't up there. I think he was in bad position. Stage 7, Matera de Brindisi, pancake flat. Demare back-to-back wins stage 7. Stage 8, this is the Alex Dowsett redemption stage, going for that World Tour contract next year. From Giovinazzo to Vieste, the break was allowed a fair gap, actually. And I think he was with Puccio, Holmes, Rosskopf, and Dowsett and Brandel worked well, the Israel Startup Nation guys, to get. They worked over the other riders in that break. And Dowsett TT'd away for his second Giro d'Italia stage win. Joao Almeida, at this point, was still in the Maglia Rosa. Let me just check his time gap. It was 43 seconds out of Bilbao and Kelderman. And I can't believe I've already had an oversight, Benji. Geraint Thomas on Etna had crashed back on stage 3 and abandoned shortly afterwards. And Simon Yates had been dropped on the Etna stage after going into favouritism for the Giro for all of 40 minutes. And then we later found out that he'd pulled out with COVID. So the 2 favourites had pulled out, and then Kruijswijk tested positive. I can't remember, Benji, whether that was after stage 8. I think that was on the first rest day. So that you always forget what's happened in the first week and focus on the last week. But yeah, unbelievable. Thomas Yates and Kruijswijk pulling out, which really opened up the race in the last week. Stage 9 to Roccaraso, Ruben Guerrero won from a breakaway, and I don't think he was a particular favourite of the other riders. Stage 10 to Tortoretto, Peter Sagan dialing back the clock. What an unbelievable stage win from the breakaway. And yeah, that's a stage that I'll definitely be going back and watching, and I'd encourage you to as well. Stage 11 to Rimini, a flatter stage, but still some climbs in it. Arnaud Demare beat Peter Sagan once again. His 4th stage win, Arnaud Demare, in 11 stages. Unbelievable. Stage 12 to Cesenatico, Jonathan Narvaez from the breakaway, the Ecuadorian for Ineos, dropping, I think, Marc Padun in a break after Padun had a mechanical in the rain, Narvaez winning. Still Almeida in that Maglia Rosa. Stage 13 de Montserrat. Diego Ulissi won this stage from a flat sprint. I cannot remember this. Oh, no, I can. This was a brilliant stage design. We're going to talk about this stage in particular, Benji. This is the pancake flat one, except for 2 climbs in the last third. And then it was all about whether De Mar and Sagan could get over those climbs, or whether it was going to be Ulissi or the GC guys. That was a brilliant stage design. So we should talk about that profile. Stage 4, ITT to Valdobbiadene, Ganna won, and Joao Almeida proved that the Stage 1 ITT was not a fluke and extended his gap, now having a minute on Kelderman, 2 minutes 11 on Bilbao, and McNulty moved into 4th, 2 minutes and 23 back. So Almeida came 6th on the stage, and Dennis had a nice performance too, 26 seconds behind Filippo Ganna. But that was moving into the last week of this year's Giro. Almeida still in that Maglia Rosa, kind of doing an Alaphilippe, but I think even more impressive than Alaphilippe and more of a realistic threat. But then going into stage 15, it was to Piancavallo, and I think there was a lot of criticism of Jai Hindley, Benji, remember, for sitting on the Ineos train when on the Stelvio stage and getting the stage win. Don't forget what happened on Piancavallo. Kelderman and Hindley drop Almeida, with Hindley pulling the entirety of the Piancavallo climb. Big numbers. Sunweb destroy this race, split the group up, and Tao Geogheganhart's the only rider that can stay on their wheel. He pulls no turns and then sprints round for the stage win. Kelderman goes, I think, 15 seconds behind Almeida. Hindley moved into 3rd, 7 spots up. Same with Geogheganhart moving from 11th to 4th. They're both 3 minutes back on Almeida, and this starts the big 3rd week of Almeida keeping the Maglia, 2 Sunweb riders 2nd and 3rd, and then Geogheganhart nipping at their heels 4th. And yeah, what a performance from Hindley on Piancavallo. In hindsight, I mean, they couldn't do anything in hindsight differently, but it's interesting how he pulled the whole time and they didn't attack Geogheganhart because he wasn't the threat. They were worried about Almeida. San Daniele del Friuli, I always struggle with that one. Stage 16, won in a breakaway. Jan Tratnik, the experience, the now more punch than Ben O'Connor in a head-to-head sprint in the last kilometres. And then stage 17 from Bassano del Grappa, where the Le Col factory is, at the base of the Monte Grappa climb to Madonna di Campiglio. Ben O'Connor winning that stage, looking very strong. He was in back-to-back-to-back breaks, I think. He had a very, very strong 3rd week. Ben O'Connor for NTT. Almeida kept the Maglia Rosa, and I think gained some bonus seconds on the other ride. No, he didn't, but he was still 17 seconds ahead of Kelderman. I'm not sure where he was. I think they kind of rode this one in because he's all the same time as Micah, Geogheganhart, and Hindley, and that was setting up the last big couple of tests, stage 18 and 19. 18 was Laghi de Cancano. This was the Stelvio stage. This is where Dennis destroyed it, I'm pretty sure, and dropped Kelderman. Kelderman still went into the Maglia. Hindley won the stage, but now GC was looking a lot different. 12 seconds behind Kelderman was Hindley, and Geogheganhart was 15 seconds behind Kelderman. Bilbao was 1 minute 19 back. So, yeah, we'll talk about Stelvio maybe a little bit again. Stage 19, Abbiategrasso to Asti. This was the protest stage, bit of a joke stage, but still a good win from Joseph Czerny for CCC. And then stage 20, Alba to Cestria, where Geogheganhart confirmed that he was going to win this year at Italia, head-to-head with Jai Hindley. Rohan Dennis splitting the race up on Cestria once again, and then Geogheganhart beating Hindley in the head-to-head sprint. Hindley going into the Maglia Rosa by all of half a second, and then in the ITT on the last stage in Milan, Filippo Ganna winning that his 4th stage, 32 seconds ahead of Campenaerts. Joao Almeida, another nice performance in 4th, but Geogheganhart destroying Hindley in the TT, 40 seconds into him at least, and winning his first Grand Tour, winning the Giro d'Italia. Benji, what sticks out from that wrap-up, that long one? What's the most surprising performance, or what did you forget about that you thought, oh, that actually was really interesting at the time?
Well, when it comes to forgetting, I'll give something else first. One thing that keeps being hammered for me is that Rohan Dennis won this Grand Tour for Geogheganhart, and that is hands down the case for me. If Rohan Dennis was not in that team, I don't believe that Geogheganhart would have come up on top here. What is special about this is it's a small detail I've posted on Twitter a few weeks ago, and it's already the initial time trial. You've got Geoghegan Hart and Hindley in a starting position in that time trial, and if you look at the time where they start, we've got Hindley getting the better time to start in that time trial, because we know that the weather changed throughout that time trial, and we know that the GC favorites who started last had a big disadvantage. Now, we got to remember that Hindley started roughly at the moment where the weather was still okay. And if we compare that to Geoghegan Hart and see where he started in that time trial, we see that Ineos obviously chose, because that was the most obvious choice, but in hindsight, it's kind of funny to think about. Ineos started Ganna, Thomas, and Dennis around the weather where it's better for the cross tailwind, just having tailwind on the descent section where the major differences were made. And if you look at the latter starters of that stage, including Geoghegan Hart, who obviously couldn't start at the, let's say, ideal moment, because we look at Dennis in that time trial and we see that he's moving across the road because of the wind, but we got to remember that he had a lot of tailwind because of that on the descent section, and therefore I think the ideal moment in that time trial was still the moment where the wind affected the riders in that straight line, and as a consequence, it would have been a difference between Geoghegan Hart and Hindley in the last week if that time trial was ridden without wind changes. And obviously, it's just a hindsight, and it's not important, but it's that small detail then that you realize in the last week that every single detail in the first week already counts also for people that were not anticipated to be the GC leader, because before the Giro, Hindley and Geoghegan Hart were obviously not leader of their team, and both teams adapted in a certain way. Hindley was able to stick with Kelderman on most of the stages, keep himself within the top 15 of GC most of the time. Unlike Geoghegan Hart, who started, I think, 69th on the first stage in GC and just went up and up every single stage. And with Geoghegan Hart, they had to make that switch between Thomas and Geoghegan Hart on Etna. And I haven't checked back, but I swear that Cestria had a better day on Etna than Geoghegan Hart did. So I'm wondering whether Geoghegan Hart worked for Cestria on Etna or they went free for all, both of them. I recall him doing a bit of work for Cestria though. So that's why I'm wondering how much that influences the outcome of the eventual Giro as well. If that gap would have been bigger into the last time trial. But in the end, I'm obviously thankful that the gap was not bigger, because it gave us one hell of a time trial to look at in the end as well. But once again, I think Dennis is the man that won the Giro for Ineos, and it keeps showing up every single time that I look at these results that I don't think that Geoghegan Hart would have won otherwise.
And Benji, how surprised were you that Dennis could do what he did on Stelvio and on Cestria? Because a lot of people were surprised by it, and I wasn't, to be honest. He's not that big a guy. He's like 72 to 74 kilos, I think, maybe even lighter. He's back-to-back before Ganna won, world champ in the ITT, in the hour-long ITTs. That's how long the time trials were that he won. And I want everyone to remember what happened in the Tour de Suisse 2019, just a year and 3 months before that Giro d'Italia. I want to talk about two stages, or one stage really. Going into stage 9, first on GC is Egan Bernal. You know who's second? Rohan Dennis, 22 seconds behind him. Stage 9 was from Goms to Goms, 102 kilometers. I'm going to read out this profile, see if it rings any bells. Newfoundland Pass, 13.3 Ks, 8.5% to 2,500 meters altitude, descent. San Gotardo, 12.1 K, 7.5% to 2,100 meters altitude, descent. Furka Pass, 11.5 K, 7.5% to 2,400 meters altitude, descent, and then flat section to Ulrichen. You know what the results were for that stage? Hugh Carthy first after a long-range attack. Second Rohan Dennis, you know who was with him? Egan Bernal. So on these long, gradual climbs, and altitude doesn't really seem to affect Dennis too much. I think he lives in Andorra. He's obviously really good at them and world class. And so we shouldn't really be too surprised by his performance on Stelvio. I think he really struggles in the Vuelta style climbs and a lot of the Tour de France style stages where you got to have real punch in the last kilometre. But against a diesel like Bernal, up to altitude, and this was Bernal who then went on to win the Tour de France a month and a half later. Like how crazy is it, Benji, now to look back at that? And do you think that's a thing? Like, do you think Dennis? Do you think Dennis is actually now like a top 5, top 10 climber on those big altitude steady climbs in the world?
I'd put him maybe in the top 10, 15, and that is because, well, we haven't seen it against the Pogacar and the Roglic's of this world, but I do believe that, like you say, these climbs, these gradual climbs with less percentage and much longer in total, a bit of an endurance climb, I would say, fit him so much better than a steep climb. I put the guy on Mur de Huy and he never gets to the top in the top 25, 30, 40, I'd say, for a whole peloton. So I don't believe in that. But if you put him on a major climb like this, I think that it benefits him a lot. And I think that, therefore, the Giro fits him better than the Vuelta as well. And I've got the same feeling with Bernal, kind of, because Bernal is obviously a very different climber, very different in shape and in the way that he climbs. But I do have the feeling that with Bernal, the lower percentages and longer climbs fit him much better than a Vuelta-style climb. And I think we saw that in the Tour de France as well. It's hard to look at this Tour de France, but I feel like we can still look at the stage in the first week and so on to take a look at what he did there. And he was also a bit worse on those steep climbs compared to Roglic and Pogacar, who have generally mastered that. Yeah, and Port and Lopez. But I would still look at Pogacar and Roglic for the kings of the steep 8 to 9 kilometer climbs, the ones you see in the Vuelta right now. And perhaps Moncalvillo is the Vuelta climb that I would point at directly, together with maybe, I don't know, Javalambre last year. Just the very steep climbs in the end, those 13%, 10% average climbs over 6 kilometers. I think we saw a lot of them in the Vuelta last year, and I think that benefited Roglic a lot there as well. And that is also the reason that on one of those stages we saw Valverde rise up again last year in the Vuelta, but that's a bit of a ghost right now. But all in all, yeah, Dennis better at those longer climbs, better at those lower percentage climbs. And
GC
I think
threat?
I don't know.
It's the big question people want us to answer. People ask for us to answer. Can Dennis be a GC threat for Ineos next year? I think he can. In principle, there is no reason why he couldn't, given what we know about this Tour de France parcours, which is going to be announced, I think, tomorrow. If there is a lot of individual time trial, if the climbs are like the ones we said, long and steady, up to altitude, and we don't have, because it's very easy to lose 2 minutes if you lose 20 to 25 seconds on these punchy climbs, and that racks up, and then 2 minutes is a lot. But if there's not those sort of climbs, and it's like the Giro, then in principle, I don't see why Dennis couldn't be a GC contender for Ineos, given what he can do in the time trial. But I don't think he will. I don't think he will because I don't think he wants to. I think he's really good, and he showed how good he can be in that role. Almost MVP of the Giro for me. Unbelievable comeback for Dennis. After maybe the disappointment of the World Champs ITT, he won that Giro for Ineos. But I think he's going to be happier just smashing it on the front, maybe for Geraint Thomas, or keeping him safe and performing the same role. So maybe it's a moot point. But yeah, do you think it's more, Benji, because there's other riders who are strong? They just got too many GC contenders already at Ineos, or why don't you think it will be that way for Dennis?
Exactly that first reason. I think Ineos has the luxury, but also the the difficulty of having a lot of GC riders next year. Let me just shortly name them. Bernal, Carapaz. We have super domestiques in the form of Amador, the Plus, Castroviejo maybe as well if he's in the form of Tourdelin. Then you have that Dennis in there, but you also have Martinez going there next year. Pidcock,
Yates.
perhaps not next year yet, but the years after, potentially, he could be a GC leader there as well, knowing what he did at the Giro U23, Richie Porte being there as, on paper, a super domestique. If that will actually happen, we'll see. I think it will be a super domestique role. You're perhaps in doubt as an Australian and hope that he gets a bit of a leader role somewhere. But there's no Santos Tour Down Under, so I highly doubt that. But Sivakov is also in that team. We look at the Tour de France, a lot of bad luck. We look at the Tour de l'Ain and the Dauphiné. He's one of the best climbers in the race. So I believe that if he gets back to that form and he forgets about this Tour de France that, well, was a bit of a shame with all these crashes for him, then Sivakov might end up being one of the better leaders on the team of Ineos. He's currently Russian. He's going to keep his Russian nationality until next year and then change it to French. So on paper, he's the biggest hope for French people for a Tour de France victory in years, which is kind of surprising, I guess. Sosa is on that team, but I'm in doubt about Sosa. We spoken about it yesterday on the Vuelta podcast. I just don't believe in it too much anymore, and I think he's running out of contract this year. So I'm curious. No, he's not. He's staying on 2021. So let's see. Can he pick it back up? Looks like he's getting mudded on the flat mainly before the climb start, but I'm not a expert of the Sosa mystery, but that's what seems to be happening for me. Then Geraint Thomas is in there as well. Adam Yates. I don't believe in Adam Yates as a GC leader. Other people do. I just don't. And the reason that I don't is that, first of all, he misses the time trial ability compared to other members in the team of Team Ineos. And as a follow-up, he is not great at 21 days in a Grand Tour without consistently performing. And if we look at 1 week race, he's much better there, and I believe that that's what he's golden at. And races like, I don't know, a Tirreno, a Basque Country, a Catalonia, those are the races where he can do well. UAE Tour as well, I think. Sammy Yates won that this year, but I think that Adam Yates can do so as well. Just those races. So they've got a lot of GC leaders. I don't think Dennis fits in the picture of being one. I think he fits more in the picture of being a super domestique for one, as he is someone you can count on when the hour of madness is near. So that's my mind on Dennis right now.
Let's talk about a man who also was going into the Giro as a domestique for Remco. That was why he was on the start list back in when the Giro was announced, the revised schedule. Joao Almeida, Remco then crashes. We saw Almeida doing a magic job for Remco before lockdown and some of those Spanish 1 week races, setting him up on climbs. Joao Almeida, he lit this race up and really the scenes in Portugal were fantastic to see. Everyone was so excited for this young rider's performance. 22 years old. He's just under, I think, 5'10", muscular, strong kind of rider. He's ended up coming fourth on GC. He's come second in the Giro d'Emilia, third on GC at the Vuelta of Burgos, which I think was won by Remco. So he was a minute and 12 behind Remco. So I think he only lost that time on Lagunas de Naya, where he fought back. He is a really, really strong climber. And Lagunas de Naya, now that I'm reminding myself, when Almeida gets dropped, it is not the end of the story. He will keep fighting, keeps pushing. Even when he's pain-facing, he just rides a really steady tempo. And he's smart too, Benji. That's what really struck me. 15 days in the Malia. 15. Only then losing, I think, the podium position or coming fourth in the last couple of days, I think, on Stelvio when Hindley and Sunweb attacked him. But he will deliberately drop himself a little bit early before he blows up, and then he paces consistently using his TT ability. So next year, Benji, what do you expect for Almeida? Is it Remco comes back, he's back to being maybe a super domestique for Remco? Do you think he could get leadership somewhere, or do you think he's a nice rider to have where Quickstep can kind of do he can be a leader that can step in if Remco has a bad day, or just a nice card to have in the back pocket. Obviously, his time trial ability is no fluke. Like, do you think he's a legitimately like top level TT rider for a quasi GC contender now? And what do you expect for him next year?
So, firstly, we've got the fact that Remco is currently out with that injury, pretty heavy injury. We don't know what the consequences will be in his career for the rest. On paper, he should be able to recover fully. If he recovers fully and gets back in the form that he was in Burgos and so forth at the start of the season, which is relatively believable, I don't think that we're just going to see a Vuelta San Juan, really. I'm not sure what the travel restrictions around COVID are going to be in January, but it's not looking too bright that way. If we look at the season of this year, he started in San Juan, then went to Algarve? He went to Algarve. And perhaps in February or March, we will see him for the first time again on the bike, Remco. So I am wondering at what level he's going to be able to return after that injury. If he gets back at the same level that he was at the start of this season. And let me remind you, Remco Evenepoel, we tend to forget now what he has done this season, but the man started San Juan, won the ITT, won the GC. He was dropped in an echelon in Alto Colorado stage. That was the one with the huge mountain range at the end. And he and Sevilla, the Colombian guy, Oscar Sevilla, they paced back the entire peloton, them alone, to the people that were up front, with the likes of a Brandon McNulty and so forth. And that front group got caught, and he was able to finish fifth after Flores, who seemed to have been a bit worse after that San Juan in the upcoming races. In Algarve, that's the next race he started. He started with a mediocre first stage. That was a flat stage, though, so expected. The second stage was Alto de Foya. He won that. That was a stage he won where Lopez had a pedal issue or a chain issue just behind him, and he was able to ride away that way. But perhaps also if Lopez didn't have that issue, he might have won the stage still. So don't want to take away from that victory. He wins that stage. He gets third on the Mayao climb finish, which is with Lopez winning the stage, if I recall correctly, Sharkman getting third or second. Because, Remco was third. And he finished at Algarve in first in the time trial as well. And he wins the GC of Algarve. So 2 stage races done. 3 stage wins and 2 overall victories. Then the next is Burgos. He starts Burgos on the mountain stage, Picon Blanco. He finishes first. He drops everybody, and those are the likes of Giro favorites, and he beats them by a minute or so. He gets that lead, and then there's only Lagunas de Neila left. There's what Sosa is rising on, the rising phoenix of Sosa on Lagunas de Neila, and Evenepoel ends third. Evenepoel wins Burgos. 3 stage races, 4 stage wins all GCs. Tour de Polonia starts. Obviously, the unfortunate accident in the first stage. As a tribute, he does that wonderful solo in the Bukovina Tatsanska stage, the 4th one, and takes the victory. That is also the GC taking him home, and therefore he has done 4 stage races. He won all 4 of those stage races. He won 5 stages in those 4 stage races. And then he started the Lombardia, on which he was with the 5 best riders on the Muro Sormano, and he was looking extremely good at the top. So you can say what you want. He was probably going to compete for the victory during that race if he didn't crash. If he would have won it, that's a what if, and what ifs don't matter in the situation. So I won't stand still by that. But if Remco Evenepoel was at this Giro, I believe he would have done really good. Really good. But again, that's a what if. Now, if we compare that to Almeida, who has been working for Evenepoel this whole preseason and performed close to Evenepoel, but not at that level, if that difference is there at the start of next year and the first 3 months show exactly the same thing, then Almeida is a super domestique. Because the Koenig cannot split their team in 2 for the GC. They don't have enough climbers, and they are not going to change to having enough climbers. That's what Lefebvre said and so forth last year. In the first year, they want to see what they can achieve with the team they have, and if that is not enough, they'll get more. They already got Cataneo and Also, what's his name? Masnada, who doesn't seem to be the perfect teammate looking at this Giro. But if we look at next year, I do not believe that if Evenepoel comes back the same way he ended, by winning every stage race he starts and getting at least one stage win in them, then he's the head GC leader of that team. And to me, that is deserving, even with what Almeida put on the table here. We can look at this Giro in many ways. We can look at it on the watt level and so forth. But we also got to look at it on the general level, that I still believe, despite the watts and so forth being pretty high, that this was not on the level of the Tour de France competition for me. And as a consequence, despite Almeida probably being one of the better TTers as a GC leader as it stands right now, we have Evenepoel in that team that was second in the World Championships time trial last year, and he was European champion time trial last year, and he beat everybody on the climbs he did on 2020 soil. So if Evenepoel comes to a Grand Tour with, as you say, the Tour de France with 80-kilometer time trials, then he puts 5.5 minutes into people like a Maika, into people like a Carapaz perhaps. And if you got 4 or 5 minutes from time trials, then you don't need to be the best climber. Then you can be just a pretty mediocre climber that can follow the group and drops with about a good kilometer to go, loses 10 seconds on this climb, 15 seconds on this climb. And as long as you don't drop from that group, then you're not going to have that issue. Now, we don't know what he is at on a 21-day stage race. That's always a mystery. We know Almeida has that. So perhaps the idea for Quickstep should be that they try and have both at the top, in the same way Bora did with Conrad and Maika, but this time with good GC leaders like Evenepoel and Almeida, and try and see what they do in the first week of a Grand Tour. And as a consequence, I would believe that even with those two leaders being separate at the start, they would probably figure out who is better. I don't believe that Evenepoel will ride for Almeida. In no way do I see that happening. Although, it's hard. Because
No, I think he will in one-day races. I think they'll use them as co-leaders in Liège, where Almeida has better punch than Evenepoel on the flat. So you use Evenepoel, use his TT ability to make other teams chase, get Almeida to sit in. There's not a lot of people who can beat Almeida in a reduced bunch sprint. I don't think, or an uphill sprint. He's really good, maybe out of that Liège group. He's also got TT ability. I think, as you said, you just mentioned it, Benji, it behoves teams now. You never know what can happen. Someone can have a bad day. If you have the possibility of two GC leaders, it is good to try and keep them both into contention into the third week, or as long as possible, just in case something happens to the one of them and you can transition to the other one. Now, if Sunweb is going to segue nicely, it can cause problems, but I see no reason why Quickstep will I think they will use Almeida like TJV use Bennett or Kuss a little bit in the Vuelta. They will not pace with them really, really hard in order for Almeida to lose time because he's blown up. I think they'll kind of keep him safe. This is what Quickstep can have at the Tour de France next year. Alaphilippe, Almeida, Baggioli, Cavagna, Dries Devenens, Remco, and James Knox, Mikel Honore, Peter Seri. That is a fucking strong all-round team. Big, good engines. Probably I'm missing out on another engine in there, but that is, for stage hunting in GC, that is a crazy strong team. But moving on to that two GC leader strategy, Benji, we've spoken about Almeida and Dennis. The Sunweb, did you catch that Sunweb YouTube video, Benji? I think, did I send it to you? Did you watch it, the 20-minute one they put up on YouTube of the last few stages?
Yeah, I watched that, and I found some really interesting parts in there, that the way DDS talks to riders and so forth, and the remarks that the DDS, I think Luke Roberts was saying in the video, were a bit, I don't know if I would do it like that, because when they were talking to Kelderman, then I believe that they were sitting in a room. They were talking to Kelderman about what the plan was for the Stelvio stage. If I would be explaining to a rider what the plan is for the next day, I would not wait till the morning in the bus to explain what the stage looks like, and additionally what the plan of the team could be, and all these scenarios. I would try and play it forward and be prepared for every single situation, and perhaps make sure Kelderman is prepared for every single situation. And maybe they didn't show that. Maybe they did that and didn't show that, but it looked like he just went into the hotel room of Kelderman, spoke to him for like 2 minutes, say like, "Well, tomorrow is Stelvio. Well, we're gonna try this," and yeah, that's it.
Did it
So,
change your opinion? Did it change your opinion on how Sunweb should have ridden the last three stages, Stelvio and Cestria?
well, I think we already had a pretty solid opinion on what we thought.
Did it change
where they
that?
could have. No, it didn't change it, and it made it
It did
stronger
for me.
because. Did it change that?
Yeah, because it was clear they never fully believed in Hindley until he was like pulling on the Malia. They were like, "Oh, this," like they didn't really think about Hindley properly as a GC threat until way too late. Stelvio was somehow a big surprise that Dennis was doing so well, and they were like, "Oh, Dennis will be done soon," and that Gegenhardt was there. So knowing what we do know about how they sort of thought about it, and then how they used Hindley, and Hindley's just terrible TT setup. By the way, always it does make a difference having all your riders having a good TT setup. You never know what can happen. Knowing what we know now in that video and me thinking about it more, I actually, Dutch fans are going to love this and they're going to say, "I told you so." I think they should have dropped Hindley back to help Kelderman on each stage if they really wanted to win the Giro, because they seemed incapable of formulating a strategy to combat Ineos with Hindley against Dennis and Gegenhardt. They hadn't really thought about it, and in that way, Hindley wasn't set up to attack Gegenhardt and Stelvio early. We saw on Cestria stage, the DS was like, "There you go, Jai. Gegenhardt's getting dropped by Dennis. Just sit on Gegenhardt's wheel." And this was on the second repetition of Cestria, and I was like, "What? Shouldn't he be attacking him?" Because you've not dropped him back to help with Kelderman. So I think there's some percentage probability, whether it's 5%, 50%, 20%. I think it's much less than 50%, but it's somewhere maybe between 25 and 35%. I think if they drop back Hindley to pace for Kelderman the entire time, maybe there's that 25 to 35% chance he wins the Malia and doesn't lose that 90 seconds. Because he ended up losing the GC in the Giro d'Italia by what in the end? Because he did pretty well in the TT. He lost by 90 seconds. Could Hindley have made that difference, pacing full for Kelderman? Maybe. And I'm not sure it helped Kelderman's mental state either. We saw the car foostering around back and forth between Hindley and Kelderman. So it did change my opinion on that. Are you surprised by that, Benji? Do you think I'm just trying to play both sides? I'm trying to appease the rampant Dutch fans?
I don't know. I feel like it's more of a hindsight argument to me. And I don't believe that that decision could be made at the moment itself to draw back Hindley, because you don't know how hard Kelderman would collapse on the Cestria stage as a follow-up. But as you say, in the video, they were clearly not believing in Hindley. And even on the time trial, I felt like they were talking to Hindley like he was going to lose that time trial anyway. So,
Oh, yeah.
if I was the DS, I would be like, "Come on, man, you can do this. You can do this," instead of, "Well, you don't have really a chance, but yeah, okay." So that's how it felt to me. And as you said, they were also less prepared on stuff like Dennis being better. They had not anticipated stuff like that, and as a consequence, the guy in the car was like, "Well, oh, Dennis is gonna be gone soon." In the middle of the Stelvio, and that was not the case. So yeah, just making assumptions instead of calculating the worst potential situation is also something that I noticed from that DS in the car, and I believe that their biggest issue, and I don't want to hurt this guy's feeling or anything, but I think that their DS just made mistakes, and or at least wasn't prepared for these situations enough, because we said on the podcast of the evening itself that there was enough time in the race to think out every single strategy. If you look at the clips that Sunweb uploaded, it looks like he was just experiencing the race and not thinking about anything while being in that car. But my comment towards the situation of Kelderman dropping and so forth, should be prepared for that before the race even started, and you should have a strategy ready for when that happens, because
We said it before
we
Stelvio.
anticipated it. Yeah.
But not just Cestria. Before Stelvio, we were like, yeah, somewhere dropping Almeida is great and all, but Ineos are going to try something with Geoghegan Hart. Maybe I'm misremembering things, but I seem to remember us saying and believing that Ineos were going to try something, and yeah, like we weren't. Because he was there with the Sunweb boys on Piancavallo 2 stages before. It's not like he was some anonymous dude at that point. He beat Hindley on that sprint when Hindley just he set that climb on fire. So yeah, it wasn't a surprise to us, at least. And as you say, he wasn't. They just seemed a bit deer in the headlights. They didn't really have a plan for Hindley, etc. So that's why it is hindsight me saying that, but now I have more information in that what I now can literally see into what was happening in the Sunweb team car, and I'm like, they were not equipped to deal with this difficult scenario, so they should have opted for the least complicated thing, and that was Jai, drop back, car stay with Kelderman, big him up, G him up, Hindley, ride full with Kelderman in your wheel, and see how you go. Because the dual leader thing, they didn't seem capable of dealing with that. And then Ineos were just too good. But another man I want to talk about, Benji. Actually, no, just quickly, so we don't go on for too long. We should talk about it before I move on to De Mar. Tao Geoghegan Hart and Jai Hindley. You think they're GC contenders in any of the Grand Tours next year, Benji?
It's hard to guess. I don't believe that Geoghegan Hart is all-out leader if he's in a team with the rest of the squad of Ineos. And that's going to be the hard thing that Ineos has to deal with now, because they've got Geoghegan Hart as an extra GC leader, what they probably didn't anticipate yet at the start of the Giro. And as a consequence, perhaps they will need to think about how they split up their teams for Grand Tours again. But I don't think that this Giro gives them an advantage over the likes of a Bernal, a Carapaz, a Geraint Thomas. I don't know.
No
It's hard.
way.
But I don't know. I don't believe in a future Grand Tour for Thomas. And the reason for that is that, yeah, there's so much talent on the board right now. And there are better climbers than Thomas. He had his peak form in 2018. I don't believe that he's going to get that form in any Grand Tour from this point onwards. And perhaps I'm being a bit shady towards Thomas, but I just don't believe in it. And there's a lot of riders that I think are off the charts for upcoming Grand Tours. My favorite shark in the water is Vincenzo Nibali. I don't believe in a podium for him in the future in any Grand Tour with the talent that is now on the table. And this is discounting the likes of an Evenepoel who didn't ride this year as well. And there's plenty of others that we saw slowly but surely creeping up this year. We had Pogacar obviously reach the top already, but so much is being brought forward from the younger levels of cycling that I even proposed to make a grey jersey for old people instead of having a white jersey for young people recently. And it might genuinely be a good idea looking at how these Grand Tours are done. Valverde could perhaps take it in the Vuelta at some point. So, honestly, I think they should do that. Just make a jersey for people above 30 years old, make the color grey, and implement it in all Grand Tours. And that would be fun, and it would give an extra thing, because right now, we won't see a white jersey except for when Roglic is partying in a Grand Tour. And Pogacar made sure that he had a white jersey with him. We also saw, well, in the Giro, the winners, the first 2 riders in GC, were younger than 25, I think. Is Geoghegan Hart younger than 25?
I think he's about 24, 25.
Okay, I think he's going to be ineligible next year. So, yeah, as a consequence, you've got all these youngsters taking the prizes, and I think that's going to get even more clear in the next couple of years that the youngsters are taking the top compared to the people that have been in the sport for a while now. Chris Froome's comeback next year, well, it was already in the Vuelta here, but his comeback at Israel, I don't believe in it. It's not because I don't believe in Froome getting back to a level that is capable of winning a Grand Tour. I don't believe in him being able to compete with all the youngsters that are moving forward and are taking control of the sport right now. And I love that, the changing of the guard. And yeah, I'm so looking forward to see the battles between a Pogačar and perhaps a Jai Hindley if he finds his way forward and gets in there.
Nah,
But
see,
he has the
can't
real
happen.
problem with a time trial. I don't believe in that. And if he doesn't get a wonderful time trial ability, then Jai Hindley won't be up there in a GC for me. Unless it's like the Vuelta, perhaps, which often leaves the time trials behind.
There's 3 ways to gain time in a GC. Time trials, dropping people... No, sorry, four ways, I guess. Time trials, dropping people early on a climb and using a proper separation to gain like a minute or something on the time, sprinting for bonus seconds and maybe getting a little gap at the end on a punchy finish, and your team creating a gap in crosswinds or flats or a descent or whatever. Hindley can't TT, terrible TT. His position was like Quintana's. He's not punchy in the finish at all. He's could conceivably gain time. The only way he'd be gaining time is getting separation early on a climb. And is he a good enough climber to do that versus the likes of Pogačar, Landa maybe, etc.? No, he's not. So my answer, will Gegenhardt or Hindley be on the podium of Grand Tour next year, is no. That's not a knock on them. It's just the level of the GC competition in 2020, 2021 is so much higher than in, say, 2018, 2019 across the board. So, yeah, on the spot, Benji, yes or no? Hindley and Gegenhardt on a podium in a Grand Tour in 2021, yes or no?
Nope.
Okay, so we're in agreement there. But, yeah, we read Gegenhardt at Ineos, he's out of contract. It's difficult. Would I pay him the moon? Already said no. But, again, he's a proper British rider. It's been so fantastic to see him win. He's well liked. The marketing stuff will play into that as well. But then you've got Pidcock coming through. Difficult decisions for them. But moving on to Arnaud Demare, 4 stage wins, FDJ train dominating Guarnieri, Scottson, Demare, beating Sagan on multiple occasions, but not really any other sprinters. No Groenewegen here, no Ewan, no Bennett, no real Quickstep sprinter apart from Ballerini and Hodge. Hodge is not going to get that contract renewed, unfortunately. Where do you rank Demare right now? Benji, I don't want to step on our toes for the off-season sprint rankings podcast, but did this move up Demare in your estimation of him into the top tier of the big boys, Ewan and Bennett?
Well, it obviously didn't worsen it, that's for sure, but just the general feeling towards Demare is that he won a lot of races, an insane amount of races this year. He won one of them, I think, against top competition. That's Milano-Torino. Perhaps you could say that in Tour de Wallonie, Ewan was also there, but Ewan had a really weak Tour de Wallonie, so I'm not sure if I want to count that for Caleb Ewan, to be honest. I think he was second on stage 2, though, so that's the only stage where I really saw Ewan push forward on that stage race. If we compare it to the competition we had in the Tour and so forth, perhaps Demare is closer than in all the last few years to the top of sprinting at the moment than ever before. I believe completely in that. He's closer to the top than ever before. I still believe that we've got different kind of sprinters. We've got sprinters that can go full muscle, and we've got sprinters that have that real acceleration boost like Caleb Ewan to try and swerve around people and get past people in the last possible second to have the ideal timing and so forth. And I believe that Caleb Ewan is still the best sprinter in the world, but we gotta look at the unfortunate accident at Tour de Polonia. Groenewegen was for me the best sprinter in the world up to then, and
Oh, no way.
Jakobsen beat Groenewegen on half the occasions that he rode against Groenewegen this year. Yeah, I don't know why you're saying no way, but I still believe that Groenewegen was the best pure sprinter compared to Caleb Ewan, and Caleb Ewan had the advantage of having the acceleration to beat him on some of these stages that didn't really have that full longer sprint, that proper 200 meter, 220 meter sprint, perhaps compared to a sprint with Ewan that, yeah, perhaps a bit shorter, or perhaps is in the wheels more. I don't believe that Ewan is the rider that takes a headwind on every single day in a sprint. So, yeah, I believe that I had Groenewegen and Jakobsen on a similar level throughout the season. Jakobsen perhaps being a bit less than Groenewegen because he had less of a history, but Jakobsen was moving really forward this year. And I believe that if it wasn't for that crash, that it sucks to say, but I think he would have been at the top of sprinting somewhat at the moment.
Yeah, I think he was looking like he was going to become the next Kittel level rider. I think on the flat pure sprinter, he was just, hopefully he comes back, but he's just so quick. And I thought he was already above Groenewegen. I think De Mar clearly now is better than Sam Bennett. I have him I have him marked above Sam Bennett. I think De Mar's got he's just better on the climbs, better. And that segues into our next point about profile design. De Mar just didn't just win pure flat sprints at this year's Giro. He won, I think, an uphill rise, one of the one stages where Kruijswijk and Nibali had attacked off sort of a little bit at the front in the last 1,500 metres. There was another stage where there were pretty hard climbs beforehand, two climbs, like 5Ks at 7%. I don't think Ewan would have got over them. So that's a tick in the box for Arnaud Demare. He did pretty well in some of the Wallonie climbs, better than Caleb Ewan did as well. That's maybe a longer form discussion for the off-season potty in the rankings, but I think Demare is clearly in the top three now, whether you have him above or below Bennett. I have him above Bennett. I think the Quickstep train effect has to be accounted for and is a real thing. I know the FDJ train was strong here, but yeah, I think Demare is very good on a variety of terrain, and we saw that when he was beating Sagan in stages that should have really suited Peter Sagan. So Demare, incredible performance. Do you think FDJ take him to the Tour de France next year, Benji? I think it's locked in.
They should, and it's perhaps because Pinot's inconsistency is so blatant now. We don't know what Pinot will do in the future. He said that he wants to change his career in some way to not be disappointed every time he goes to a Grand Tour. So that's basically the story. So I believe that Demare is going to the Tour de France next year. Obviously, if it's absolute trash at the start of the season next year, that could totally change. But if he has similar form than he had at the Giro going into the Tour de France next year, then he's going to be one of the sprinters that goes for most of these stages. But he's going to have proper competition then in comparison to the Giro, where he was running against Sagan, the rider that could not really get consistent top fives in the Tour de France sprints. And yeah, I think Sagan is a real notice that we saw him move up that way, and we saw him slowly but surely move up into a proper form in the Giro. We could say that the Giro form of Sagan is better than the Tour de France. I'm pretty hands down about that. And yeah, we were talking about profiles as well, right?
Yes. Did you like the Giro sprint profiles compared to maybe some of the Tour de France ones? There's those stages with a couple of climbs beforehand, makes it interesting. Is Demare going to get over it? Is Sagan going to get over it? Is it hard enough for Ulysses to try something, etc.?
Yeah, those stages are ideal, but on the other end, Demare's probably one of the only sprinters that could get over them. Ewan a few years ago could have done it, but he slowly but surely become more of a pure sprinter and less of a sprinter that can get over climbs, because I swear Ewan won proper hilly sprints in his past, and I think Hatterdam was a perfect example of that every single year. I think Bennett won Hatterdam this year. I could be wrong. It's one of the two. Could be Ewan as well. But all in all,
Ewan won Hatterdam.
Okay, Ewan won Hatterdam. Yeah, you're right. I remember now.
Get the fuck
not
off
for the first time. Sorry for bashing Australia once again. I believe that, like you said on that one stage in stage 7, 8, I don't know, I don't remember which stage, that flat stage with the two climbs where we had the discussion of whether Conrad and so forth should go back to the Sagan group and whether they should help out Sagan to try and take the stage. Well, that stage was perfect because that's the kind of tactics that make it so perfect to mingle about and to talk about and to think about what could happen in this kind of stage. Even that mountain stage in the first week, where there's one mountain in the middle of the stage, and that is basically the 140-kilometer one with a flat finish. That was an ideal stage for me as well because on the climb you would see first Viviani drop, Gaviria drop, then you'd see the likes of De Mar dropping, but more in the descent part than the climby part, to be honest. And as a consequence, he was a bit behind. He got back to the group and was able to finish off that stage. But that action on the climb and in the descent to try and get back with the sprinters makes the race so much more entertaining. And it makes a shorter sprint stage entertaining because otherwise, if you got a 100-kilometer flat stage with a sprint in the end, you're going to have most likely 96 kilometers of pretty boring races. If you put a climb, it doesn't need to be a big climb, but some climb in there to make it more difficult for the sprinters to find an all-out sprint, and you make the whole stage interesting. And I think that will increase the numbers when it comes to viewership on TV and watch time overall. And that is what is kind of lacking on some of these other stages that were perhaps a 260-kilometer flat stage. I don't want to talk about the protests again or anything, but when it comes to a sprint stage, this should not have been in the Grand Tour in the first place. But when it was in, then it could have changed the outcome of the race a tiny bit, but I don't think it would have in hindsight. So that's a small detail aside. I believe that sprint stages should try and make themselves, well, that organizers should try and make sprint stages as entertaining as possible throughout as well, to make sure that people don't just tune in for the last kilometer, which on most sprint stages happen. But on the other end, you've got people that are pure sprinters, and you shouldn't disadvantage them in any way. And those sprinters should also have an opportunity, and therefore you should still have those purely flat sprint stages. So yeah, it's a bit difficult, but that's at least what I see when it comes to the sprint stages. And shortly before I throw it to you, what I noticed when it comes to the Giro is also these mountain stages where you've got the biggest climb as your second last climb, and then you finish on a smaller climb in the end. Happens every single Grand Tour. That is the Giro. And last year we had it with Ponte di Legno. Not exactly a climb in the end, but there was a major climb just before it. And then they finished on a bit of a false flat uphill of 10-15 kilometers. We had it on the Monte Avena stage on 2019 as well. We had a major climb, the Passo Rolle, as the second last climb of that day. And then in the end, we had the Monte Avena climb as the last one. If you look at the years before, it just gives it more and more. And perhaps 2018 is the real difference there, where, yeah, it's still true. The second last climb is still a smaller climb, but it's still higher than the climb towards the finish line. And the action is forced to happen on that second last climb instead of the last one. And that's why a stage like the Stelvio brings absolute madness. And one final example is the one from 2016. I think it was, this one, Sant'Anna di Venadio. It's a bit of a smaller example. You've got the climb, the Colle della Lombarda, which was a solid 20-ish kilometer climb. And then you've got the descent to a 6 to 7 kilometer finishing climb. So very similar way. And I think that improves the entertainment on that second last climb already, and then brings the all-out chaos on the last one as well as a consequence.
Yeah, I think they did pretty well in this Giro, designing interesting stages. Even the long mountain stages, there was a lot of action in the GC. Sometimes it is out of the organisers' hands. You've got to remember they can't predict what the GC fight is going to look like in the third week of a Grand Tour. So much changes. And maybe if Thomas was 5 minutes ahead, maybe on that third week there would have been nothing happening on Stelvio. It would have been a neutral race. And maybe, they just all rode it in and sprinted at the end. Same with Cestria. So sometimes the GC situation can just make the race. But I think that was all we had for this Giro wrap-up. Obviously, fantastic win for Tao Geoghegan Hart. Second, second, Keldon. Was it second, Jai Hindley? I'm already yes, losing the plot, Benji. I've already changed in my mind who should have been the GC leader for for Sunweb, because I decided they should have gone back to Kelderman. Sorry. Geoghegan Hart first, Hindley second, 40 seconds back. Kelderman third, his first Grand Tour podium. Still a good result for Kelderman. He's off to, I think, Bora next year. He's leaving Sunweb. Hindley staying there. fantastic Giro for Almeida. Big result for him. Bilbao, 5th. We haven't mentioned him, but a lovely backup after the Tour de France, coming 5th in the Giro. Fulsang should never ride a Grand Tour again as a GC leader. Obviously, that experiment, I mean, if he's not coming in the podium on this Giro, then it's never happening. So, yeah, he skipped Liège for this. It didn't work out. 7 minutes back and never really looking likely either. And he had his teammates riding for him a fair bit on some of these stages too. Nibali, not a great Giro, 1 to forget. 2, really just not competitive. He was down in 7th, 8 minutes back. So, yeah, maybe Nibali transitions into a stage hunter next year. I'm not sure.
I'd love it. I'd love it. Just go to a Grand Tour and go to a Grand Tour with the form that you have perhaps at this Giro, and just lose 20 minutes on the first day, 30 minutes on the second day, and then just hunt for stages. And yeah, you're right.
A lot of good news stories here. Dowsett getting a stage win. Hopefully that helps him get a contract. Ben O'Connor got a stage win. Bit of a shame he didn't get a longer contract, to be honest, but he got a contract then at Ajoie for 1 year. Be interested to see what he does next year. Quickstep are looking really strong. They shouldn't bring Masnada. I don't think they'll bring him to their A priority Grand Tour. I think Knox and Honoré is looking really, really good. The Danish rider for De Koenig. He's just got to watch it. Him, Almeida, Knox, Remco, Seri, Dries Stevenens.
Everybody.
just disgustingly strong. Just so strong. You got to watch out for them next year. They're all so young too. It's terrifying. Except for Dries Stevenens, he's like 40 years old.
No, he's not.
Isn't he?
He's not 40 years old.
Dries Stevenens is really old. Trust me. It was his first World Tour win this year. At
oh yeah, he's 37. What?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
You're not even proper Belgian. You don't even know the exact age of your Belgian riders. I don't even know. I know. He's like nearly 40 years old, and he's only won 7 wins in Cadel Evans Road Race. This year was his first World Tour level win. So yeah, he's actually like looking better this year and last year than ever in his career. Dries Stevenens. He was doing so well in Lombardia for Remco. But yeah, Quickstep wants to watch for next year. It was a very memorable Giro. A lot of stuff happened. I hope we did some justice to it on this podcast. Thank you to Lacole for supporting the pod throughout the Giro. Make sure you check out their kit at www.lacole.cc. We've been having rave reviews from everybody. We love seeing on Instagram, etc. You guys showing us the packages of your Lacole kit. Benji's probably going to have to be wearing it a lot more now that his car got totaled by a tractor. Benji's car was stationary, by the way. I think it was just an errant tractor, but I didn't ask too many questions about it. But I'll let you sign us off, Benji. This Giro, I know we've got the Vuelta straight afterwards, but we wanted to do it justice. Comment down below your most memorable moment from this Giro, and then Benji, the one and only Benji Naesen, will take it away.
First of all, thank you very much for sticking with us on this Giro. Thank you very much for being supportive of our podcast. And yeah, that's basically it. We're going to do more and more in the next season as well, because we're looking at this now from a standpoint of a very condensed season into one package, and we've got a few more stages to come from the Vuelta. We're going to try and fill up the off-season with some interesting concepts. If you've got ideas for that, throw it at us. We're trying to make a bit of a short list that we can go through if we find ideas really, really good and viable to talk about for 50 minutes with it being useful for you all. And yeah, that's basically it. Thank you very much for being a part of this, and ciao.